Hello everyone. How are we doing today? I hope you're all good. You are not hungry. Given us dinner time. But yeah, anyway, my name is Ruslan. I work for Revolut. I've been working for Revolut for the past 2 years. I've worked in several teams within the Revolut, and before that, I used to work in Wolt. Wolt is like a food delivery app in Finland and Eastern Europe. So today I'm going to talk about how to do a research when you don't have a researcher. I'm going to cover some of the basic research types and how to do them without like elaborate equipment and without spending thousands of dollars on the tools and so on. So for some of you who are familiar with the research, this will be like a nice recap of the common knowledge. And for some of you, hopefully, this will be a new and useful information. All right. So first of all, those of you who don't know, Revolut is like a fintech app, an online bank operating in Europe, UK, US, and many other countries. Particularly myself, I used to work in the insurance department for a year and now work for savings. And yeah, if you want to know, we launched savings products in most European countries, offering some nice interest rates. So be sure to check it out. All right, product placement time over. So now let's get to the topic. So first of all, let's recap what the research is and why do you need it. So basically, research, in a nutshell, is when you try to understand how users use your product in order to make them better. Why is it important? So first of all, good user experience attracts and retains users. And you need to understand and speak to a user to understand what exactly is a good UX for them, for this particular product, for this particular situation. Now, next one is the informed decision-making. So myself, I encountered countless of times when I was arguing with the developers or product managers on what approach is the best, what design is the best. And it's always like my word versus your word. But when you do a research and when you bring some test results to a table, you actually make, you show the numbers, you show the data that this one is the best approach. Next one is reducing costs. So yeah, this one is simple. If you create a flow or a feature that is like suboptimal, you end up losing some money, you end up dropping some metrics, and you end up like having to redo this flow once again, and time is money. So if you do the research, you reduce the risk of having to remake this. And last one, staying competitive because it's a competitive market, and you need to know what your competitors are doing in order to be better than them in your field. Right. So I usually split research into two big areas. Like one is the pre-research, which is basically when you want to understand a user before building the product. This could be like a context analysis, market analysis, user interviews, and so on. The next one is like the post-research, is when you already have the live product and you want to understand how to improve it or how people use it in order to improve it. So, I read many books, and maybe you also heard about the importance of research in podcasts, videos, books, and whatever. And it's always like, to me, it always feels like when I read like Marty Kagan book, it feels like they're talking about some companies that do not exist, like some fairy tale companies that do the research, they value users and invest in that. Unfortunately, I never worked in a company like that, so I had to adjust. In real world, there's always no time or no budget for research. You're always pressured to ship features as fast as possible, break things, and there's always no budget to hire a researcher and stuff like that. But I found that it doesn't mean that you have to stop it. There are ways to still do it on your own, regardless of whether you are a designer, researcher, developer, or product manager. So, what to do in this situation. First of all, ideally, you'll have to convince the team that research is important for your particular product at this particular time. And there are some common misconceptions with the research. First of all, people think it's costly, that you need like a full-scale, full-blown research lab to run your tests, to do eye tracking and stuff. Like, that would be ideal, and that would be very cool if you have it, but it doesn't have to be that way. There are some lean methods how to do research on a shoestring, which I will cover later today. Second conception, that it's too long. We don't have time for that. So again, the more you do the user tests, the more you do research, the better result you get. But you could still get pretty good tests in under a few days, which is pretty good. And last one, research is required. Some teams can't have the budget, and it's not worth time to have the user researcher. That is true, but the reality is that everyone could be a user researcher regardless of your role. So, how to do it yourself? Okay, so you want to do a research, but your team manager is not on board, so you want to do it yourself, and you don't want to, spend a lot of time or money on that. So, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to cover 3 most common research types, and I'm going to share my tips and tricks how I usually do it on a budget or when I have to do it quickly. And at the end of this topic, I will invite you also share if you have any insights on that. Okay, so the first one is the context research. So basically this one is when you try to understand the market and how people use your product. As a designer, I always do the competitor research, try to look at the user flows of other apps, but it could be problematic. Like if your company has the money, usually there is a specific person who go through the flows and then analyze that and then gives it to you. But usually it's not the case. And if you want to analyze the competitors, it could be problematic because some of them are not available in your country, and you cannot do that. Or if you work on an internal product like B2B product, you couldn't get an access. You have to buy a demo or something. But there are some ways to do it. So one life hack that works for me, I usually Google for app walkthrough. And some companies actually record their apps for marketing purposes or for advertisement or for some user guides. For example, I did that when I was working for Wolt. I needed to get Glovo internal app for delivery guys, but I couldn't get it because I'm not a Glovo delivery guy. But there is a walkthrough of their app online, so that was pretty handy. And also, there are some resources. For example, Mabin.com. I like to use this one. It's mostly for designers, but basically it has flows of popular apps, like screenshots. So I do find it quite helpful. And the last one is Ask Your Peers. It's going to be actually the most common advice today. Given the Revolut is international company, so we have many people in many different countries. And I usually just end up asking them, please, can you record this app for me or that app for me? And yeah, if you're nice enough, people usually are ready to help. Okay, so next one is usability test. So basically, this is a great way to settle an argument if you can't decide which approach is better within the team, or to understand if the feature that you're creating is actually good and is actually understandable by a user. So in a nutshell, how you do it quickly. So first of all, you build the prototype or you build the test. Then you recruit some participants and then you do the test. And it could be online or in person. So this one actually, excuse me. So yeah, this one actually helpful, as I said, to settle an argument, or it could prevent you from doing something bad with an app that you are not sure. For example, if some of you has Revolut, you might have noticed the new redesign, the Rev 10 of the app. And during this redesign, during this exercise, we ran countless user researches, and we actually had to redesign the add money screen because the initial version, we did a usability test, and it turns out that people actually couldn't find how to send it, and it reduced some of the metrics. So we kind of, avoided the bad things here. All right, I'm gonna cover these 3 main things. So first of all, how to build a prototype. You don't really need to build a working app in order to test it. There are some lean ways to do it. As a designer, of course, I recommend using Figma. This is quite a useful tool, even if you're not a designer. Basically, it's really user-friendly. What you do is basically you connect some screens with some arrows, and you hit play, and you get a prototype of the app that you could get to the hands of the user. But you can be even more lenient than that. One time I just made a few screenshots of the app and I showed it on my phone to some user and asking them hey, please could you tell me where would you click if you wanted to buy a specific item? And that was just a screenshot on my phone. It was took no time to do that, no preparation. So that was pretty quick. So user recruitment. This one is probably the hardest part when you're trying to do the test, is where to find people to actually do that. I will cover it more in the next section, but I just say that it depends whether you want to run an in-person or online test. In-person tests are usually better because you could see how users react and you get more quality data, but online will get you quicker and faster and more results. So let's say you're running an in-person test. So what you're actually going to do? Let's say you have the phone, you have the prototype in it, and you find a person that is willing to to walk you through. So first of all, I would recommend setting up the context and the task. So basically considering how is your product typically used. For example, if you're designing or working on the, let's say, online store, what you want to say to a user, you want to tell them, okay, for example, you're looking for sneakers on a sale, and your task is to purchase this particular product. Now, why do you need it? Because if you don't give user a task, they'll just start wandering around the app, trying to click here and there, and you probably won't get the results that you're looking for. And the context is important because, well, as you may know, different people use different apps in different environments. If you are working on, let's say, internal tool, like one time we were working on the internal tool for accountants, and during the research we found out that people actually work under a lot of stress because usually there is a supervisor in a room with them when they work on the tool, and that results in different ways how they interact with the design. They read more, they are really cautious where to click, but if you design like a casual social app, people interact with it in a different way. So next tip is to ask users to vocalize their decisions, like when they walk you through the app, ask them to say what they see, to think out loud, because otherwise they will just go through your app and that's it, and you wouldn't get much data. And the last one, and this one is quite important actually, try to observe and do not guide the user. Because I've seen people who try to do the research like super quickly, they get really angry when users don't click when they want them to click, and they just end up for a user feeling like it's a test and there is a right answer or wrong answer. So actually not. This is for you. The goal here is to understand how exactly people react and make like users' mind very easy and not let them think like it's a test or something and they could fail. So yeah. Treat it really casually. All right. So the next one is online test. If you want, like if there is no one around to check your designs, you can do the online test. Of course, there are tools that are listed on the right, the maze.com or usertesting.com. I find them quite useful, but they do cost money, and you do need a budget for that. And if you don't have it all, I recommend using Google Forms. They are free and they are really, really easy to use. And for example, what you could do, you can just make a form with the screenshots and the questions, like where would you click in that case? Please answer what do you see on the screen. It's a free tool, and at the end of the day, if you send it to multiple users, you will get a really nice like analytics and pie charts on how people answered. And from my experience, last test that we did, we were launching Revolut in Ireland. And our researcher was on the leave, so we didn't have access to the tools listed on the right. So what we did, I created a Figma prototype, and at the end there was like a big button, please complete the survey. So users would complete the prototype, and then in the survey there would be some questions about the designs that you just saw. And this resulted in like really nice analytic results that we used later to make the right decision, hopefully. All right, one of the misconceptions that you do need a lot of users. So this one is a nice chart from Nielsen Norman Group. These are like the gods of user research and UX. So they found out that, yeah, you do need a lot of users, but it looks like that. So if you want 100%, you could keep researching and keep adding users to your test. But if you're happy with like 80% assurance in your results, or if you're happy with 80% of user problems that you could find, you're actually fine with like from 3 to 6 users. So 5 is a good number. And if you have a budget or time to run 15 tests, I would recommend you to run 3 tests with 5 users rather than 1 test with 15 users. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so the next one is user interviews. So doing tests is nice, but actually what is better is speaking to actual users. Why? Because you are not your user. Mostly because when we are designing and developing the product, you see this, 7 days a week, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, and your eyes are kind of not the same as it is for a user. So what I do recommend is to talk to users as much as possible in order to understand who actually is. So yeah, your main question you want to answer is how they use the product. You want to understand the product context, and you want to understand the pain points and unusual patterns that people use. And for example, I will give you 2 examples from Wolt. You know how if you work for any app, so you know how in food delivery apps you can like restaurants, and you could save it for later. So during an interview, we actually find out that some people they like restaurants which they don't like. So the thing is, some people they like the restaurant so that they don't order from there again because that was a really bad experience. And yeah, that was actually surprising because why would you do that? But yeah, people were using this feature all the way around. And another example from Wolt, which we actually implemented. So during the interview and the field test, it was actually quite interesting because in Wolt, you have to spend a day as a delivery guy in order to understand how it all works. And while we were doing that in a Wolt dark store, where you pick the groceries and you put the order together, there is an app for the delivery guys who do that, who follow the list and then put some groceries in the bag. And the app was designed in a pretty standard way. However, the use case was that delivery guys, they usually use one hand for picking the groceries and another hand for holding the phone. And some of the patterns, they required 2-hand usage, like if you wanted to type something in. So we had to redesign that so it would fit the single-hand usage use case. Yeah, and it boosted the metrics, not directly, but obviously it reduced the order pickup time. All right, so recruiting the users. As I told you, this one is pretty tricky. How do you get people to speak to you? So first of all, I would recommend understanding the target audience, like the demographics, the country, because if you want to speak to a user about your product, it's better be someone who fits the demographics. Like if you're building an internal product for an accounting firm in Japan, probably your friend from Europe is not the best guy to talk about. However, there are some products that are users agnostic and one fit for all, like Sleep Tracker, for example. You could pretty much talk to anyone who uses it. So, okay, you know a person, roughly, a portrait who you want to speak to. First of all, this one is quite obvious. All you could do is send emails to users. It wasn't obvious to me. Before, I was thinking, why would they do that? Why would we want to do this? But actually, when we first did that, a lot of people turn up. Sorry, and we sent, I remember, 100 emails, and we got 30 users. They booked the 30 slots for an interview in 1 hour. So people were eager to speak to us, and most people they really like having an interview or talking to someone from the product team because they feel like they are empowered, that they are contributing to the product. Sometimes you could offer an incentive like Amazon gift card, but it's actually not a requirement because in our case we didn't offer any incentive and people were just happy to talk. Although in our case, from the people who booked, only 30% showed up to an actual interview. So yeah, just keep that in mind that not people come to an interview if you don't offer any incentive. The next one is asking peers. As I said, this is probably the main way to reduce costs. I would encourage you to speak to your colleagues or to other employees. But I would advise you to do that with those who are not working in your team, and ideally those who are not working in product or engineering at all. Like in my case, I usually go to the support floor or to the sales floor because those people, they are less biased. Because if you go to an engineer and you ask them to go for the flow, they might start giving you feedback on how it's not possible, how it's not feasible, or designers might start to criticize your designs, but that's not what you're looking for. What you're looking for is for how people use the product that you're testing. And the last one, social media. So yeah, I used this one a couple of times. You can ask your friends to pass a test, or you can ask your friends to talk to you. For example, I talked to my friends from Spain or from UK when I designed something in Revolut. Or also a nice way is to look for subreddits and specific groups about the app you design. One time I was working on the app for artists to upload their work. It was like Dropbox, but for artists. So we wanted to recruit some potential users, and we used artist subreddits. and we said, okay, please talk to us. We built this really cool product, and yeah, a lot of people showed up, and that was pretty useful. All right. So this one is just a quick life hack. Get support from customer support. So customer support guys, they actually work with the users, all the time. It's their job, and they actually know more about product than you might. So I would encourage you to talk to them quickly, understand like what users are complaining about, and they do have a pretty good understanding of what are the common pain points. Although be wary that if you do it, don't overdo it, because otherwise you could become a person that they always come to once there is a user request, and yeah, that wouldn't be pretty for you. Do you hear me okay? Because I feel okay. All right. So let's say you did all of that and you got actually some good feedback. So what to do with it? It depends on the initial goal, of course. Like if you were doing the user research to settle an argument, yeah, you just show the data and you make the right decision. If you were doing like a discovery research to understand how people use the product, and you actually got some ideas, I would recommend you to brainstorm it and go to the manager or your peers in order to include it in the future roadmap. There are some lessons, though, that I've learned along the way how to work with the feedback. So the first one, I would say, do not implement blindly. Listen to the problem and not use a solution. So many users, they would start offering you solutions like, "Ooh, it would be cool to have this in app or that in app," or offering you the solutions for the particular problem that you're discussing. But the thing is that you are actually the product expert, and if you just implement whatever user wants blindly, it could turn out ugly. Like there's this famous meme about how would Apple look like if they were listening to users directly. And the moral of the story here is that you are the product expert. So try to dig deeper if people are complaining, or if people are saying, "Hey, I would like to, have the button to send money to all my friends at once in the app." You can try to ask them more, why do you want that? What exactly is the problem? How is the pain point? And you can come up with a better solution for user problem than themselves. And the next one, beware of power users. So there are users that use your app in a very heavy manner, in a pretty unique way. And for some apps, they could be the lifesavers. They could be actually the target audience. But the problem is that some of their use cases is quite unique. And ideally you need to find the balance between the power users and the regular users, and to understand the percentage of their use case. But, for example, in Revolut, we had one guy who set up their sub-accounts in that way that they had a little pot for every little single category. Not just food and groceries and travel, but really divided it all down to, let's say they had a pot for tomatoes, a pot for healthy food, a pot for some specific products. But they were heavy users. Like this guy, he was keeping, I think, a couple of, tens of thousands of euros in an account. And yeah, he's a pretty heavy user. He's a pretty valuable for the company. But if we were to implement his use case, this would damage the majority of other users. So yeah, the lesson here is to try to understand if what the person is telling you is his unique and specific use case, or is that a common problem? Yeah, and that was pretty fast. That she said. Anyway, so yeah, that was it. If you have any questions, or you also have any insights on how to do something very cheap and very quickly in terms of the research, please speak up.
Hello. So previously you suggested to collect feedback from users via email and
right.
platforms like Reddit, etc. I understand that there might be a negative skew here, like people might use channels like that to complain, basically. How do we deal with that? Do you have any advices, any tips?
Yeah. Actually, this is a really good question because I had this exact situation. Because after the user research, this guy who I did research with, he keep emailing me because I was like his personal Revolut advisor or something. He kept emailing me asking me about the new features or complaining about some stuff, like I'm a support agent. So yeah, usually the good way here, what I did, I talked to the brand team and to the support team, and they mocked up a message for me and basically directed them to the support channel. So yeah, the good advice here is when the person starts to like, well, not annoy you, but kind of overstep this like professional boundaries, it's best to direct them to the proper channels.
So when it comes to app, we also have mobile stores. How to deal with them? Because users tend to write a lot of interesting things there, but we need to qualify them and go through. So do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. That the user reviews is also a good source of feedback. You don't really. One thing I would say that when you analyze user feedback from the mobile apps, from the app stores, one thing is to not take it too close to heart because, like as you all know, if your users are happy, they're not going to leave a good review, but they are more likely to leave a review when it's a negative emotion because the negative emotion is more stronger. So if you see lots of negative reviews, just make sure that it's not the end of the world. It's not most people who think like that. But yeah, this is, I would say, one of the good sources of data. I would collect them as well and put them in the idea tank to brainstorm with the team later. I see a question right there.
Do you have any specific research events, or you do research all the time, or you do research from time to time, or you do research when you want to ship a new feature?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in Revolut, it really depends on a department, and it really depends on what exactly we're building. For example, when we were working on Rev10, we had a couple of really big research events where we invited people over to the London office, and they were like doing the usability tests, and everyone was recording that and looking at them. But in Revolut, really down to the product teams and the departments. So if your product team, well, for example, my product team, we are thinking that research is good and that it's valuable for a user, we usually do it ourselves, and we usually do it in a couple of situations. So mostly we do it when we are not sure about some particular feature. We always try to do it when we ship a really big change to the app or a new feature. We try to do a quick usability test before like looking it up with developers. Yeah, and the last one is pre-research, as I mentioned. Like before starting the app, we do a lot of research on the market, on the context, and on the competitors.
In my day-to-day work, I face the situation when we conducted research and the users literally, I wouldn't say kind of, wouldn't be so open to us. Did you face a situation when you roll something and then you roll down or you make an update because research was failed? And follow-up question on that, do you think it's maybe better to roll something really quick and then less functionality and then to see how it works in reality? Because sometimes researchers fails because people tend to not to say all the truth.
Yeah, that's a good question. I will answer to the second one though, because for the first one I never had this situation, fortunately. But yeah, for a long time, Revolut had this philosophy of like move fast, break things, and then if it fails, we just redo it again. So it works, but I would say it works to a certain point. Because afterwards, breaking things becomes quite a costly endeavor. If you have lots of teams and you have very expensive developers, and you need to redo and re-release, it's just quite costly. And the second thing I would say that it doesn't have to be like one thing or another, because the research could be in parallel with development. You just send a test, send it online, and while people answering, you still work on something. So that's what I was referring to when I said it's not really time consuming. So ideally, you would have as much sources of data as possible, and then you make a decision whether to go this way or that way.
First of all, thank you for your talk. You mentioned the issue often being time and budget. And
right.
Of course, we also face this. So my question to you is like, how can you convince the other team members? And you said how to do research without having a researcher. Who, in your opinion, would be the closest person responsible for doing the research?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. So regarding the budget, I gave a few free tools that you could still do when you don't have a budget for a good tool like usertesting.com or Amaze. But what worked for me, usually I was trying to get a budget, but it wasn't possible, so that's why I resorted to these free tools. And who would be the person? Well, in our case, I'm a designer and I do this stuff. Also, product manager usually does this stuff. But I wouldn't say that it's limited to a particular role. And I always encourage developers in my team to do research as well. Well, at least look at the competitors and offer some ideas, because I feel like when everyone in the team understands user and understands what exactly we're doing and why we're doing that, that would be more beneficial than just a one person being a bottleneck and doing all of the research and he's out and no research in the team left.
Hello, my name is Rok. First, thank you for your interesting presentation. Maybe one question especially interesting for people coming from more regulated markets. Do you have any specific compliance requirements when you organize your initiatives, research initiatives?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fintech industry, it could be a problem because I couldn't just message to a user in a Slack or just drop them an email. Usually there is a process to go through that, and that's why again it could be tricky because it takes time to get approvals from everyone in the food chain. So yeah, and how to combat that? In my experience, well, first of all, you have to do it. So you have to go for the legal. But usually, if I got no time, but I still want to do the research, usually I go for the colleagues. So I ask them to go for my prototype, or at the very least, as I said, ideally not from the product or development teams. I just post in the Slack channel, say Ireland, asking everyone from support, please, go ahead, visit that survey. Of course, it's more biased information, given that they are already working in a financial institution, so they a little bit more know about it than the average user. But it's still a good way to get the data. And another cheat code is to ask the colleagues, to ask their friends, to go for the prototype. Yeah, this is really varies depending on the research and depending on what you're trying to find out.
We also try to recruit in the product itself. So you have a Q&A section or an FAQ section. Put a sign-up link there and get the people
Yeah.
have a problem.
Yeah. That's really good suggestions. What we also did, we have this NPS service in the app sometimes, basically saying how do you like Revolut, or just please answer the short survey. And at the end there is usually a checkbox saying I agree for you to contact me later afterwards in the future. And this way you get a base of user emails that you don't need to contact prior to make a research.
The opposite to how to not end up in analysis paralysis. So how to not over-research.
Well, first of all, I'd say that's a good problem to have. But yeah, generally it could be a thing. Yeah, when usually it happens when the product manager and the designer, they both for research and just end up researching all the time and not making actually a good decision. Yeah, I'd say at this point, like in life as well, you just need to make a decision and pick one, because we had the same situation when we researched and there was a 50-50 split between the two options. And it was yeah, we got 10 users here and 10 users there. There are pros and cons for both options. And then we go to the developer just to get some understanding which one is more feasible. Maybe this way we'll make a choice, but they say it's similar. So yeah, at the end of the day, we just flip a coin and pick a solution.
No more questions?
No more questions. Well, all right. Thank you. Yeah, and I would encourage you to try at least one of these in the coming weeks in your team and try to see how will it affect your product. Thank you for listening.